lighter? I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But I will obviously let you all know. So, my personal COVID story is that I was diagnosed with a chronic illness in March, as I may have mentioned. Up until that point, I'd heard about COVID-19, but I was actually one of those people that didn't think it was as big a deal as it became. I obviously knew that it existed, but when people, like my housemates, were saying, oh yeah, they're saying they might have to shut uni down, I was like, yeah, that's never going to happen, what are the chances? Which was obviously quite naive of me. But yeah, around that time, I started to see double vision on occasion. I had this weird experience with my ear where I would hear wind. Like, especially when I, like, put pressure on it, like I jumped or I squeezed my insides, like, I would hear wind, and it was a very confusing time. I was obviously quite concerned about these symptoms, so I went to my GP and I explained what was happening, and they referred me to the opticians to have an appointment to look at my eyes, because obviously the double vision was quite concerning. I didn't actually mention the ear thing at the beginning because I didn't think the two were related. So when I went to the opticians at Specsavers and had one of those field tests where it's kind of like playing what's the game where you shoot things? Space Invaders. It was kind of like playing Space Invaders, because little buttons would pop up, little lights would pop up, and you'd press the button to show when you saw the light, basically, for each eye. And they were concerned that I had some blind spots in my vision, so referred me to the ophthalmologist at the hospital, which was, I think, a few days later. And then that was on the 16th of March was when my hospital appointment was. I went to the hospital and I told my family that I was going. And this was when I was actually living in Cardiff for uni. So my sister was still living with her boyfriend, my brother was at uni, and then my parents were living in London. I told my mum that I was going to hospital, and she said, do you want me to drive up to Cardiff and meet you? And I didn't think that my hospital appointment was a big deal. I thought they'd say, no, you're fine, don't worry about it. So I said, there's no need. Stay home, it's fine, I'm going to be okay. But when I got to the hospital, they looked at my eyes, and I was told that my optic nerves were swollen. And then I was moved to the ambulatory surgery unit, I think that's what it was called, where they would basically look at other reasons why this might be occurring, because they realised that it wasn't a problem with my eyes, it was a problem with my central nervous system. And I informed my family of this, and then, oh dear God, the worst thing happens, my phone dies. Luckily, I had my laptop with me because I was anticipating going to uni straight from the appointment. Boy did that not happen. So I actually updated my brother Simon on what was happening throughout the day, so he could pass it on to my family through WhatsApp. I told them that I had a blood test to check for, I don't know what, high blood pressure, thick problems, I don't know. I don't really know what they were checking for, but I had a blood test. And eventually, I was told that I would be having what's called a lumbar puncture. And if you don't know what a lumbar puncture is, it's basically where a needle is inserted up to your spinal cord to test for the levels of the fluids in your brain and spinal cord. And the levels, like the optimum level is between 20 and 25. And my levels were 37, which is obviously way too high. The thing with the lumbar puncture, though, is to this day, I actually find this quite hard to talk about. It's one of the most difficult things I've ever gone through. You're under local anaesthetic, but it's extremely local because they need to know when you feel pain, because if they don't, they could potentially paralyze you if they get the procedure wrong. And that terrified me, especially as one doctor literally said, he said, like, oh, make sure you don't move. We had one patient move and now she's paralyzed for life. Like, way to terrify a girl! This junior doctor, fully qualified, and I don't dispute them for that, but he clearly wasn't that experienced with lumbar punctures, and I went through a lot of pain through that procedure. They kept hitting various parts of my spine that weren't meant to be hit, and I could just feel this horrible pain going down my leg, which was absolutely horrific. And it was very unpleasant. But they got my levels down to 22, which I very much appreciated. And it turns out that my mum made a decision to come to Cardiff to pick me up, because she realised that what I was going through was a lot more significant than I'd made it out to be. I was diagnosed with an illness called idiopathic intracranial hypertension, which in English stands for you've got too much pressure between your brain and spinal cord, but we don't know why. Apparently it's most common in overweight and obese women. So my main treatment, along with the medication that I was prescribed, was to lose weight. And that's why I'm doing Slimming World. And actually, it's gone pretty well. I've lost nearly 4 stone, and I'm very happy with that. And I'm now at a much healthier weight, and I've no longer have symptoms for the illness. But that didn't mean that I didn't keep having to go to the hospital as soon as the pandemic started, because a week after I had that appointment, we went into lockdown. And bear in mind, I'd just been diagnosed with a pretty significant chronic illness that, if untreated, by the way, can lead to permanent blindness or, potential, brain damage. I was pretty nervous about that. I did have hospital appointments under COVID care. By that I mean COVID procedures were in place and they knew that there was no way they could avoid seeing me. However, one of my appointments, which was an ophthalmology appointment, it was delayed until New Year's Eve. I think it was originally meant to be in April, and that is May, June, July, August, September. 8-month delay! I had many consultations over the phone regarding my illness, but yes, it was primarily for my peace of mind. I didn't feel like I got the treatment that I would have wanted, and I do not blame the NHS for that. I just hate the fact that we were in this pandemic as I was getting this illness. I would have rather not have a pandemic. I mean, I'd rather not have my illness either, but yeah. I realised that I'm still so privileged compared to other people who've gone through so much worse during this time. So I do acknowledge that there's people who have it far worse than I do, but we have to acknowledge the massive strain on the NHS and also the people who are struggling with other illnesses, as well as obviously COVID during this really hard time. It makes me incredibly emotional thinking about it, because the number of people who aren't getting the treatment that they need during this time is heartbreaking, and I wish that there was more that I could do, but also hate the fact that it's primarily down to the government not funding the NHS sufficiently so they can help more people. So yeah. But to end on a light note, I am a lot better. I'm in remission for my illness, which sounds like a scary thing, remission, but it just means that effectively it's dormant right now. I don't have any symptoms, I'm not taking my medication, and after my ophthalmology appointment, it turns out my optic nerves are no longer swollen, so I'm doing a lot better. Also, if you're wondering about the wind in my ear, which I don't think really got investigated, but it was clearly part of the same problem, it's gone, so that's all good. There's a likelihood that if I gain weight again, I could get symptoms back, so I just need to be cautious of that. with my diet and my exercise and things like that. I just need to make sure I'm a lot more on it, because I do have a condition that means that my weight needs to be regulated far more strictly. But yes, I'm happy that I'm doing a lot better. I wish that I didn't have to go through this. I wish that many people didn't have to go through this, and I wish we weren't in a pandemic. But hey, here we are.
Time for Tea and Talk.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Tea and Talk. I'm sorry that the latter part was, even more heavy than the last few weeks have been. But I wanted a chance to tell my story, why the topic of the pandemic and everything involved with it is actually quite personal to me. Thank you, and I'll see you, hear you, and keep making that mistake. I will hear you next time. Let me know what you think, and goodbye.
It's Wednesday at 11, so you know what that means. It's time for Tea and Talk.
Oh, what's that?
Bitch, please.